The American poet Walt Whitman famously wrote in one of his poems, "I am large, I contain multitudes." Rabbi Ken Roseman was larger than life, a towering intellect, a towering physical presence, whose life contained so many multitudes from so many years of varied and rich experience that he gave to the life of this congregation and to the wider Corpus Christi community. That multitude of experiences began with his childhood. He was born in Washington, D.C. to Edith and Alvin. And as his father pursued a career in the Foreign Service, he traveled a lot. So he wasn't only raised in Washington, he was raised in Geneva and Athens, broadening his horizons in a way that kept going throughout his life. He graduated from Oberlin College, and while he was there, he was mentored by the late Rabbi Balfour Brickner, one of the leading lights, one of the leading Reform rabbis in the Reform movement at the time, who inspired him to pursue his rabbinic career. And his application to Hebrew Union College may have actually also been, in a way, the beginning of a lifelong commitment to not just learning, but a constant commitment to learning new things. When he applied, Hebrew Union College said, "We'd love to have you as a rabbi. You have all of the background we want. There's just one thing. You have no background in Hebrew." And he said, "Don't worry about it." And in the course of one summer, he learned the Hebrew he needed to learn in order to not only study to be a rabbi, but go on to be the accomplished rabbi that he was. And indeed, every year at Rosh Hashanah, he committed himself to the goal of learning something new, recording video, reading or writing something, and even learning to play the French horn, a long-time dream. Most of these he accomplished with characteristic excellence. The French horn apparently not so much, but he continued no matter with the same perseverance that he continued it with everything. And that love of learning that he had was also turned into a lifelong love of teaching. Ken was committed to learning and teaching in every form, with a unique ability to share his great and abundant knowledge and intellect in a way that was accessible and welcoming to all levels of learners and was full of wit and wisdom. Whether he was teaching in Torah study, speaking to the city council, engaging in interfaith work, or selling pickles at Food Fest, he was able to make everything into an opportunity for questioning, teaching, and sharing edifying and entertaining stories, so that all who met him felt that they had walked away having learned something new. And he taught in a multitude of ways. As Dean of Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati, as a rabbi in congregations in Wisconsin, Dallas, and of course here, he taught in so many ways. And I should say he was very proud. He told me that he was the rabbi emeritus, not of one, but of two congregations. And he taught through writing books and producing videos on primarily Jewish history, but other topics as well. And I have many colleagues who shared with me that they knew, even if they didn't know of Ken, if they didn't know Ken, they knew of him, because either as teachers or as students, they had used his series of do-it-yourself Jewish adventure books for young adults that was geared towards teaching complicated and difficult, challenging subjects to young adults. For instance, how does one teach about the Spanish Inquisition to children? Ken worked it out. And of course, he also taught in so many places around the community, at universities, at churches. He went to so many places that he spoke at. He participated in so many boards in the city, such as the Christus Spawn Foundation Board. And He even, in the last few years, acted as a docent for the art museum. And a testament to this is that we just received, before we started the service, a letter from Bishop Mulvey and the Catholic Diocese of Corpus Christi, sharing their condolence and their great remembrance and fondness for Ken. Now, he didn't just teach in formal ways, he taught in other ways through example and action. And one of the things that's particularly interesting is that his name, Ken, in Hebrew means yes. And he did what he could to say yes to people, to make it possible for as many people, whoever they were, to be included in learning and community with kindness and compassion. One of my colleagues shared that when he was a student, Ken was the dean at Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati, and he received a note one day saying that the dean wanted to see the student to deal with his financial aid application. Very worried, he went to meet with him. Immediately, Ken put him at ease and said, "I wanted to see you because I want to make sure that you were applying for enough financial aid. I looked at your application and I didn't think you had." And it was for this reason more than anything else that his students in Cincinnati didn't call him dean, they called him coach, because they knew that he was their supporter, their protector, their friend, as well as their dean. And Ken was also very proud of having on one occasion ensured that one very special young man who had been confined to a wheelchair was able, in the congregation that they were in at the time, many years ago, to reach the bima, to reach the pulpit with dignity. Because at the time, as they were approaching his bar mitzvah, there was no access ramp for people with wheelchairs. And so Ken took the lead in getting a group of people together to, in the course of just a day, build a ramp. And he, by his own admission, he said that most of the people that got together had at best a rough idea of which part of a hammer should bang on a nail and maybe a vague acquaintance with a circular saw. And yet, he led all of these people to create this ramp so that this young man was able to zip up it for his bar mitzvah with a big grin on his face and with all the dignity he deserved for his special day. But also in keeping with the biblical prophetic call for justice, Ken was also more than willing to say no, particularly when it came to injustice, and particularly when it came to speaking out against those who ignored the oppression of the modern equivalent of the stranger, the widow, and the orphan. He was unfailingly the first and most insistent voice in our clergy alliance meetings to insist that we hold the powers that be accountable and speak out for those who have no voice and no power of their own. And while I was looking for his Jewish history series on YouTube, I also found a video of him at the city council, speaking at the city council, giving an invocation that only Ken could have given. He stood in front of the city council and said to them, "There are cities where they take great care to be concerned with fighting corruption, to be concerned with taking care of the poor, to be concerned with making sure that the least of us is taken care of. And there are cities that do not." And he looked straight in the eye and said, "And I ask you, you must choose which one will you be? What legacy will you leave behind?" And he did all of these serious things with a sense of humor and joie de vivre. Whether it was dressing up as Megillah Gorilla for Purim, or putting on a Jewish version of Grease called schmaltz, he was always there to make people laugh as well as think, and usually both. Who can forget his groan-worthy puns, which he painstakingly unfolded with utmost seriousness until they reached the punchline, where he would break out in a great big grin as the rest of us groaned and laughed. And who of us can forget the pickle hat that he wore as the pickle man, where he sold pickles with great joy at the food fest, and he loved the fact that that pickle hat put a smile on so many people's faces. But perhaps more than anything else, what truly gave Ken joy, what truly put a smile on his face, was his family. He was a beloved husband. Philip shared with me and others that there wasn't a day that they spent together where she didn't learn something and didn't laugh. And he was also always so proud of his children and grandchildren, what he referred to as the best 4 children with the best 4 spouses and the best 11 grandchildren a couple could hope to have. And we know this as a community because every time we got to the point in our service where we asked for mazel tovs and good news and happy occasions, the most eager to share them was always Ken as he shared the latest milestone from one of his grandchildren. And so with all of this, we realize that traditionally, we say that after someone dies, may their memory be a blessing. In the case of Rabbi Ken Roseman, there is no question of may. His memory will be a blessing to all who had the honor of meeting him and learning from him. And as I conclude my words here, I fully expect to hear a polite cough from over in his regular seat. When I would do text studies in Friday night services or in Torah study, Ken would always listen patiently and listen as everybody else shared. And then at the end, he would put his hand up or cough politely and say, "Not to be contrarian, but I have a different viewpoint." And he would share the last word. So I think it's fitting that I give Ken the last word. And it's particularly fitting that in some of the recollections that were shared, Ken shared some words that were about this week's Torah portion. They were about the phrase, "You shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy," that appears in this portion, Kedoshim. And that was shared in an interview with the Christus Spawn Foundation in their 2019 annual report. And I will share those words so he can indeed have the last and wisest words tonight. He said, "I have been trying to figure out how do you live a life that is worthy of being in covenant with God? What does it take to be in that relationship? How do you do it in such a way as you live up to that expectation? In the book of Leviticus, it says that you should be holy because the Lord your God is holy. What does it mean to be holy? In Leviticus, it's very clear. Specific act in community. It doesn't say go pray. It doesn't say go meditate. It doesn't say go to synagogue or church or temple or anything like that. It says go out. Establish fair courts, and go out and take care of the poor, and go out and don't lie and don't cheat. Love your neighbor as yourself, and that kind of thing. So the question is, what kind of specific acts should I be doing, and by extension, should we all be doing, that make me worthy of being in covenant with God? And as we would so often say after Ken had shared his wisdom at the end of the lesson, you can't top that.